I am the Reverend Algernon Lewis, Chairman of the Moravian Church, East and West Indies Province. Welcome you to another edition of Courage in Crisis, Conversations of Faith and Mental Health. And we have been doing, this is our third installment, I believe, and we have been just trying to respond to the crisis of COVID-19 because we recognize a lot of people are in places that they've never been before. We realize that they're dealing with issues that they're not so sure how to deal with. And so we have come up with some professionals from across the region who will share their experience about mental health because that's their profession, and they will share, and you hopefully will learn. You can join us every week. We're on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we hope to hear back from you. If you have any questions, you can just contact any of your Moravian pastors, and they will put you in touch with us so that we can help you to journey through this process. Today we have with us on today's program, Mrs. Billy Sterling Lewis. She's in Tobago, and she is a psychologist. She will tell us exactly what kind of psychologist she is. And we also have Dr. Brian McLachlan, who is a psychiatrist, and he is coming to us from Barbados. So welcome to both of you, as we will have our conversations today around the topic of anxiety, depression, and suicide. Those are big topics. Before we go any further, I'd like to make this little disclaimer that even though they're professionals on this program, we are not always so hot with the technology. So from time to time, you may see some glitches here and there. Let's just bear with us. And the other thing is, where I live, you always hear additional background sounds. So you'll hear my cocks crowing in the background. Don't get fear. Just let that be part of the relaxing. They crow without any warning. So you will hear something in the background. Anyhow, so we can proceed. And thank you for joining us. And feel free to share this on your Facebook page or YouTube channels, because we are coming from the Calvary Moravian Church YouTube channel and their Facebook page, led by the Reverend Adrian Smith, and we thank Brother Smith for his input. We just want to ask people how you're doing. I'm hoping that we can admit how we are doing, give vent to our feelings, give validation to our feelings, and move on from there. Billy, how are you doing?
Well, I am adjusting. I am slowly evolving. Every day I find myself cycling through emotions. And I'm sure lots of persons are having this because I've spoken to some of my friends who are going through this. Like, for instance, I had to go out today. Every time I go out of the house, my anxiety level goes up. Every time I get back inside the house, something starts to hurt or tickle or scratch. And so I have to remind myself, okay, Billy, you took all the precautions, so you're okay. But I'm cycling through, but doing well.
Okay. And Brian, Dr. McLachlan?
Yes, well, I'm having to adjust as well because I'm actually still having to go to work. But it's so strange being on the roads, and the roads are, pretty much empty. And then at work, I mean, the focus is now obviously very different. We don't have the normal busyness that we normally would do, because the focus right now is on containing and preventing certainly COVID from coming in. So it's as you said, there are lots of emotions that are there as well. But for now, coping and managing.
Okay, so we're talking about anxiety, depression, and suicide. Can you give us a definition of anxiety? We may use words and not so sure exactly what we are talking about. So can you give us a definition of anxiety? What is it? A feeling, an emotion, what?
Well, I'll start. When we talk about anxiety, just as an emotion, it is just that. It's a feeling of apprehension, generally fueled by fear. And it tends to have the person feeling a little bit fearful or scared of the unknown. So it is where the body is responding to those uncertainties and unknown situations. That's just the emotion. But many times we use the word, as you say, so loosely, where even when it's more than just an emotion, it's more like a disorder, where the definition changes now, but includes that there's something totally different.
Okay, right. So there, be talking about physical, mental, cognitive experience symptoms. Can you give us what examples of anxiety? What does it look like, Dr. McLachlan?
Oh, okay. Well, yes. Anxiety often presents with physical symptoms. The person will say that they can feel their heart is racing, feel a pounding in their chest. Sometimes their mouth gets dry, they start to sweat, they start to feel like they want to urinate, they get headaches. There are a number of physical symptoms that are associated with anxiety, which if persons don't realize that's what's happening, then they believe they actually have a physical illness, and they will present sometimes to their general practitioners, believing that their problems are certainly physical. And when anxiety gets extreme and you can get into what we call panic, then you get certainly an intensity of those symptoms to the point where persons often feel dizzy and disoriented, and will often feel that they're having some kind of a catastrophic medical event and that they're going to even die. So the feelings are very real, and they're very concerning, and they're in many instances really quite disabling as well.
But can I add to that? I mean, one of them, in terms of the thoughts become very much irrational, as Brian said. They may think they're having a heart attack in a panic situation, or they're dying, they're terribly ill. But generally, they have what we call one approach, the awfulizing. They catastrophize everything. The thought process is very rational, and they think that everything is going wrong, and they themselves, everything is going wrong for them. So the thought patterns as well are greatly affected with anxiety.
So is it valuable for somebody to say, I'm feeling anxious right now? Is there value in somebody just saying that I'm feeling really anxious now?
Well, definitely. I think we want people to understand that right now it's a stressful time. It's an anxious time. It's an anxiety-provoking time. Life on a whole is stressful. Now we've added COVID-19 to it. It's even more stressful, and stress and anxiety go very much hand in hand. And so if people are saying, I'm feeling very anxious, well, that's really good. One, because it means they're recognizing some of what they're experiencing, and they're able to name it. And that is what we want people to understand. At this point, it's okay if you feel that way, because the situations that we are in right now warrant that sort of feeling. So just to take away anybody's fear from feeling bad because they are anxious, it's okay to feel that way at this point.
Yes, I think I'd like to echo and reinforce that as well, because let's face it, what we're speaking about in terms of COVID is something very serious. And so, persons shouldn't be trying to trivialize or minimize the fact that they are going to feel very anxious, as they should be staying at home, certainly, but you're always concerned about whether or not you're going to come into contact with it and whether or not you're going to get it. And you only have to look at the images on television as to the results and the consequences of having the infection to understand why people will be as, and I'll use the word fearful, as fearful as they can get with regards to potentially coming into contact with this illness.
Okay, so I think we've sort of hinted at it, that this whole COVID-19 situation is an anxiety-provoking situation. What are some of the other things that can provoke anxiety? Because thinking of what you see on television of, okay, I went out today and social distancing was not the best that it could have been. People were too close, and you wonder if you pick something up. That's one thing. But what about, what are some of the other things that we may be in right now that could provoke one's anxiety?
Well, if I could go with that, everything in life has been affected now because of COVID. So as I said earlier, yes, anxiety is linked to fear. Everything has been affected by COVID, and our anxiety is very much linked to fear. And there's a great, cloud of fear around us. We have anxiety and fear that's coming from the uncertainty of people's work. Some people have already lost their jobs. Some are not sure what's going to happen. And that brings anxiety, because if you lose your work, you're going to have a financial situation if you don't have a good reserve somewhere put down. And so people are having some anxiety about how am I going to provide for my family now that I have been laid off or I have less hours. You have people being fearful and anxious about, you know, being in lockdown, and being around people who they may suspect to be infected. I saw a video yesterday on the media of a community where they have set up an isolation unit in Trinidad, and this one gentleman came out and got villagers riled up saying, we don't want no COVID. He kept saying COVID. He wasn't using the correct word. We don't want no COVID here. We don't want no COVID here. And I mean, the police were kind of harsh on him, but I was saying to myself, these people are so afraid, they're anxious because they're saying when they bring these COVID positive people in my community, then I mean, whether rationally or not, the disease is going to just spew out on all of us. So people are afraid and anxious about contracting the disease, this virus and the disease, or coming into contact with those persons, or even being in isolation. I remember speaking to somebody who was in isolation recently, and it was so rough for them. It was so rough. So these are some of the things that are linked to COVID that have people on edge, have them feeling anxious and fearful on a general day.
Right. What did you say, Dr. McLachlan, to somebody who is on the, what's the word? They're not so sure if they have it. They've been exposed to somebody who has it, and they're not so sure if they have it. And they're waiting for the 14 days to pass because there is no test for them. What do you say to that person?
Well, I think it's being aware certainly of, again, what is likely to happen in terms of if you do have it, and in terms of if you're going to start to develop the symptoms. You're usually encouraged to be doing things like taking your temperature every day, monitoring whether you have getting a sore throat or coughing, those sorts of things. So I think empowering people to sort of say, okay, well, this is on you at this point in time. You're going to monitor you, okay? Because there's not much more you can do apart from that if you have in fact caught it. So it is, you have an opportunity to monitor yourself, and then usually you'd have been given some contact information to get medical advice depending on what symptoms that you've developed, and persons should be checking in with you as well. You can reassure people as well in terms of, again, that even though it's not hard and fast, the younger you are, then certainly the better the prognosis is. This may be an issue in the type of contact that you've had as well. So the particulars in terms of why it is you found yourself in a quarantine situation are going to be important, but it's also one, how you're going to monitor yourself, and then what are the activities you're going to do while you're in quarantine that's going to serve as, I'll use the term distraction, a bit of a distraction, but are also going to, again, be helping you to decrease the anxiety that's going to come, because unfortunately you might be sitting there waiting for symptoms to come, which may not come, but you still have to be there trying to manage, that anxiety and taking anxiety reducing steps, which can be a challenge because sometimes the things that we do in order to manage our anxieties about other things we do outside of the house. Now you're being put in a situation where you're in the house and it's like, okay, well, what can I do? What should I be doing that's going to help me to stay calm, apart from being very proactive in terms of managing myself?
Mm-hmm. And I would jump in and add there, from a faith perspective, for those people particularly who are of faith, singing helps a lot. Singing, praying, having your pastor call or other people call just to pray with you and encourage you in that time.
Dancing.
You have a phone nearby that somebody can call. And whether you can sing well or not, but put your radio station nearby, YouTube and otherwise, because it's a distraction, but it's also an encouragement. Okay, if we can just pivot a little bit to from anxiety sometimes leads to depression. Is that correct? Is that a correct statement?
Yes, yes, certainly.
Yeah.
So again, what is depression? These are words that we use. Can you give a simple explanation so that anyone can understand?
Well, I'll do that. I think when mental health professionals talk about depression, and we are often talking about a specific illness that has specific signs and symptoms. But I think to try and break it down, depression often refers to, again, periods of sadness. Now, we talked about grief a few days ago, and most of us, again, because we've had experiences with grief, so we understand that sadness certainly comes with that. And therefore, sadness as it occurs in depression is it's not a foreign concept to us. But in depression, then there is sadness. There's not necessarily sadness at a specific event. There's sometimes sadness and persons don't even know why they're sad. The sadness is prolonged and it is intense. There are often changes in things like sleep, okay? Classically, in depression, sleep is actually decreased. So persons will have difficulty going to sleep. They'll get up early in the morning, much earlier than they're accustomed to. Or you can get to the flip side to that, where persons are sleeping a lot more. They're just going into bed, they're tired, and they're sleeping a lot more than usual. Changes in appetite. Classically, in depression, people have they don't feel hungry, they don't feel like eating. But then you can get the flip side as well, where persons then start eating, and they start eating all sorts of very unhealthy sort of foods, foods with a lot of salt and fat in them, because these are comfort foods. And if especially there's anxiety present, it makes them feel better to do that. Persons develop a loss of interest in terms of their normal activities, so things that they're accustomed to doing or feel like they get joy out of doing, they don't do anymore. Persons, as I said before, can become very withdrawn. So you find they're not involved with family life as much. They're going into their rooms and spending prolonged periods there. Persons can become rather irritable. So sometimes you don't want them to be around because they start to be very short with you and they're very irritable. They can be very agitated as well. And in some instances, persons also start to seem to get a little bit confused. They're not thinking clearly. You see gaps in their memory. And so these are some of the symptoms that certainly can be associated with depression. And I've said that, and then you kind of say, well, this is perhaps some of those have happened to me at some points in time in my life, depending on what the situation has been. So normally the concern then is when this is all prolonged, when it's all going on a lot longer than you expect. And sometimes when there's not a specific stressor, there's not anything specific that seems to have triggered it, or what has seemingly triggered it, you just figure, well, the person should not have had this intense reaction to whatever that is.
So a person in depression, would there be any vacillating, like they would, I don't want a manic depressive kind of situation where one moment they're hyper and the next thing is that a different thing?
Yeah, well, yes. Manic, yes, used to call manic depression is now called bipolar disorder. So that is different because that describes periods of depression, but then often periods of the complete opposite, which is elation, happiness for no reason as well. Sometimes anger, very purposeful and overactivity and even hyperactivity. Persons get into a lot of different sort of things as compared to when they're depressed when they're doing absolutely nothing at all. So we talk about bipolar depression, we talk about unipolar depression. It looks the same, but then they're two different sorts of illnesses. Trying to make that simple, yes. But depression is a little bit more common as a condition in and of itself, as opposed to bipolar depression.
Okay. Okay, so, Billy, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, you said it earlier about the link between the anxiety and depression. I just wanted to just say that, sometimes we forget that, we tried to mention it in the last session, that we already have things going on in our lives. And we talked about the grief and people, I share this quickly. I remember I had a meltdown. It was a full-blown panic attack a few weeks, 2 weeks ago. And it was interesting because it just caught me off guard. I had gotten some news about the COVID. I had decided to get out of control. And I had a full meltdown. And I remember the next day after I had gotten over it, I heard about the first infant death. And I remember I dealt with it very well. And I said to myself, maybe God knows why I had this meltdown yesterday, Because if I had heard about the infant death, me having lost a baby just last year, I do not know, because I remember when I heard the news, it stopped me. I'm like, okay, I can handle this. I can. So things are going on in people's lives, and they continue to deal with issues, continue to deal with their anxiety, their depression, and whatever other issues they're dealing with. And this is bringing it on more. So it is important that we learn, as we've been saying all along, to recognize what you're dealing with, acknowledge it, and do what you can to find ways to cope with it.
Can I jump in quickly and just say
Sure.
that, yeah, I think, because what Billy's hinting at certainly also as well, the persons who perhaps potentially may have diagnoses of anxiety and depression, and then something like that comes along, it's not just we're talking about COVID, but then we're talking about maybe specific aspects of COVID that would have more resonance for us, but then are more stressful for us as well. And so persons who, have those diagnoses do need to be careful in terms of whether or not, even if they've been going along quite well, whether or not, it can trigger certainly a relapse of their condition, whether or not symptoms start to develop again or worsen. And, that requires them certainly, to be contacting their mental health professional. Hopefully that situation has been set up in terms of being able to pick up the phone or use a video link or whatever. But persons need to be mindful that they're doing well, perhaps, but we're in a stressful time, as Billy's sort of saying, that can trigger, symptoms to come back or to get worse.
So you're saying the people who have had issues with depression, be very cautious. That
they need to be cautious, and the people around them, the family members who are aware of that as well, then they need to also be observing, and this is observing, and rather not every 2 minutes asking, you all right, you're all right, you're all right. But it does, because some people, again, they don't necessarily recognize when they are, and especially in depression, when they in fact are slipping. I might feel, if I'm depressed, that I just want to be quiet for a while. But others around notice, no, but this is, not your usual quietness. This is quietness that suggests that perhaps you're becoming, you're coming unwell again. And so persons around, family members, friends, and whatnot, should be monitoring and should be encouraging, certainly when they see that things are not going, in a way they should for the individual.
Okay. What we started talking about it, but I'm wondering if there's more. What do you say to the people around somebody who is prone to depression, or who may be slipping into depression for the first time, because for the first in their lives, they're not able to just jump in their car and go to work for 7 o'clock and come back at 7 p.m. and then bathe and go to sleep. They are now sitting home, is that everything is on pause, and it's they're slowing down, so it's like weighing heavy. What do you say to the people around them? What do we do? Yes, we notice that there's a difference. So what do we do?
Yeah. I will start, and I want Brian to finish up, but I want to say that you said people are slowing down, but the reality is, in many cases, because of how we live our lives, a lot of our routines were very much strategic to help us cope. So yes, we go to work. Yes, we go out, just some people just go to Limes, like retired people. But sometimes being in a home, being in your own space, having to be with yourself in your own mind, sometimes it's so painful or difficult based on what they're dealing with, that yes, they get to be home, but now they're trapped in a place that they can't escape from as easily, because they can no longer drive about the place. They can no longer go by their friend, go by the shop, go on the corner, and just, distract positively in that way, distract themselves. Escape, yes. And it's just the reality, because we have a lot of trauma around in our society that was pre-COVID. And so one of the first things we have to help people to do is to be, even with anxiety, is to be grounded. How we reach out to these people, or they would reach out, help people feel grounded, and let them know that it's okay to be in this present place, in this present state. But what you have to understand is that even if you don't feel 100% in this present time, place, and state, that there's safety around you. Yes, COVID is making us feel unsafe, but let's look around in the house right now. We're doing all the things that need to be done to keep us safe. So there's some measure of safety, and then there's some measure of control that you have. The thing that you can't control, leave it alone. Allow God to give you the peace to deal with that, as we use the serenity prayer. But let's focus on what we can control. And then we've been saying this all along, and I think we're going to continue to say it. Let them connect in ways that could help them to not get lost or feel trapped in a cycle that they cannot control. However they connect, you pray, you allow God to guide you through meditation. I am one who uses essential oils, and I promote that as very, very useful as an alternative means of relaxing and coping and releasing negative energy. So there are other things, but I just want to start with those. Allow yourself to be grounded. We're here now, we're in the present. Let's not get trapped in the future that's going to scare you if it's going to cause you to be unwise in your operations.
Okay, so what's the next step after we're running out of time? What's the next step after
the grounding?
You have anxiety, you have depression, that sort of hopelessness sets in. Is that the next step, and what goes after that?
That is very much the concern. Yeah, that's very much the concern with regards to persons, especially if they're depressed and they get to the point. And depression is associated with feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and then there's the anxiety that we've spoken about before. And those three things often can combine in order to get persons to a point where they think, I want to harm myself. Often starts with feelings of, I just wish I were dead, but then it can get to a point where persons think, all right, I need to end my life. Remember, hopelessness is that you're not seeing anything bright or positive in the future. You're just seeing that everything is negative and dark. And helplessness says, I can't change this. I can't change this. And more than that, no one else around me can change it. And when you combine those two things together, then what's left? There's no further point to life, and that's what sometimes people think. And if you combine anxiety, which is, and we talk about that as fear, but there's also what people describe as dread and darkness and that unpleasant feeling. And so persons want to escape from that, and they think the only way I can escape from this is then perhaps to harm myself. So that becomes worrying. And if there's a family history of depression, if there's a family history of suicide, then we certainly need to be very concerned about persons at that point in time and be monitoring for when they start to do, again, things that suggest this is where they are at. Whether it is that they've gone and they have bought things that can be used to help them to harm themselves, whether they start giving away their possessions, whether they are telling people, let's make up, I've forgiven you or whatever, because they're again trying to make peace with things before they take that next step. So persons do need to be attuned, and we talk about being attuned to whether or not someone is becoming depressed, but we also have to be attuned to whether or not they get into a point where they are thinking, I wish to end my life. Because obviously that becomes a very serious situation.
So we want to be able to say to persons to keep your eyes open. And depression, anxiety, even suicide are also part of the community of faith, right? There are times when people do go through that dark night of the soul and think that all is lost. And we want persons to understand that as dark as it gets, that there is light on the other side of the tunnel. The scripture says, weeping may endure for a night, joy comes in the morning. And sometimes it's difficult in those difficult spaces to imagine how joy can come in the morning, but that is God's prerogative. That's where God comes in, where we don't have it all at all. And I like Psalm 42, and I really want to point people to Psalm 42. Beautiful psalm, as the water pants for this, as the heart pants for the water, so my soul pants after you. And the last part of it, verses 8 and following, say, I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why must I walk about mournfully because the enemy oppressed me? As with a deadly wound in my body, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me continually, where is your God? And the last verse says, why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my help and my God. Somebody says hope is, anytime you have hope, it means that you believe that something else can happen. And the point that you don't think that anything else can happen, you've lost hope. And I want to say to persons in this crisis, yeah, you may just have taken out your car and now you lose your job, or you just finished building your house about to, and there are just so many permutations and combinations. All is not lost. I cannot, and none of us can tell you exactly what is going to happen, but we believe that all is not lost. We'll encourage you to reach out to one of the panelists, reach out to one of our Moravian brethren, reach out to somebody, and just say, listen, I need to talk to somebody about the situation. I'm feeling particularly hopeless. I'm feeling like, all is lost. I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, or, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Just saying to you, that's the reason why we came on these programs, so that we can encourage you to understand that there is something more. We want to really encourage you to look for that more. So what are we taking away, having people take away from today as they've listened to us? Anxiety, depression, those are things, anxiety, depression, suicide. Can you just hit quickly, because as I said, we are out of time now. Just point form maybe what you want persons to take away from this conversation of faith and mental health.
Well, as we said earlier, just for you folks out there, feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression, even sometimes hopelessness, they are normal reactions to stressful and really troubling times. So I don't want you to feel despondent, or especially if you're a Christian, to feel that you are not saved because you're feeling like this, but rather allow it to move you in the direction of getting help and release. And we've just read the scripture. Know that even in the midst of your fear, your anxiety, that God is with you. And if you do those things that are available in terms of coping strategies, you will get to the light on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Brian, anything?
Sure. I think Billy has talked about, some of the individual things persons can do, but I'd like to speak about the things that we can do for others around us, whether it's family or friends. Some gender issues here, because men are much more likely, again, to, let's say, commit suicide. And they're much more likely to have depression, and persons don't know, okay? So it's important that those of us who are, observing our family members reach out, especially when, people, again, men especially, will say, I'm coping, I'm managing, and so on, when they are not. Women, and speaking generally, obviously, will reach out. And so that connection that we're talking about, again, sometimes you will have to make that connection. Don't expect that connection to come to you. Reach out so that you can ensure that persons are okay, because this is a difficult time. It is a stressful time. And if persons, again, separated from their normal methods of coping, then, it means that we all have to be vigilant in making sure that people are managing and getting through this experience.
Can I just add this one thing? I know we're out of time, but a lot of people have chosen to cope with the drugs, the alcohol, the marijuana. Lots of our islands have decriminalized marijuana. We don't have time to get into it, but folks, do not allow these to be your escape routes, because they have within them, at the end of them, other complications that will make it even worse for you if you do, God forbid, contract COVID. So alcohol and marijuana and other drugs, they may seem to give you temporary relief, but they will do you more harm than good, mentally, emotionally, physically, in the end.
Right. Thank you very much. We were just having a conversation of faith and mental health with Dr. Brian McLachlan in Barbados, a psychiatrist, and Billy Sterling Lewis, a psychologist in Tobago. And this program has been brought to you by the Moravian Church, East and West Indies Province, as we seek to help persons to cope with the COVID-19, with the issues are relating to COVID-19. We want you to know that we love you. We are praying for you. We believe in our Caribbean people's resilience, people's resilience in general. We believe in the faithfulness of God, and we believe that God has provided what we need to be able to navigate this difficult course. And so may grace and peace be upon you. And we look forward to seeing you here again on Tuesday coming, where we'll have another conversation with Tuesday at 5. And may God bless you. Enjoy your Holy Thursday and the rest of your Holy Week. Blessings and peace. Bye-bye.